Hey guys, Matthew here once again. Wanted to go over a few quick subjects that maybe not so quick, but yep, some big important stuff's been going down. First of all, I've been playing a Thorns build, which is much more of a build than you'd ever give it credit for. Been having some real clean, just fucking crisp Thorns gameplay that I don't know, actually very much an archetype and probably one of the nicer builds that you can actually get around at the moment for fairly cheap, that it's just going to be, not too hard to pilot and get you through most of the game and even early game. But before we want to go over that, that'll be a guide at the end of this video. To start with, I did want to wrap up and go over my thoughts and basically what's happened with the interview with Ziz and Mark and Jonathan. So yeah, if you're kind of out of the loop of what happened, we did have Ziz was going to hold Jonathan and Mark fully accountable for all of their crimes. He was going to take no prisoners and he was going to get in there and just fuck shit up. Mostly just talking about, the state of the game, some of the concerns from the community, and just go over a few questions about design decisions and all of that. And he certainly came in swinging. It's, if you missed out on it, there were fucking uppercuts, there were elbows thrown. I think someone put out a razor blade at some point, a steel chair. It was pretty wild. But in reality, tensions were kind of high, and it did start a little abrasive, I'm going to say, mostly because it was no ill feeling from anyone, I don't think. Just both parties were coming in with, one person wanted to make sure they were being representative of their product in the best possible way, and they knew that, it was a bit tough going at the moment. And then one other person, we'll say Ziz, wanted to make sure that the community's voices were heard, and he was holding them kind of accountable. He wanted to make sure that he was not going to go soft and, get to the hard issues and absolutely get into, get some real answers for some of the real questions. So there was a little bit of abrasiveness to begin with, just because this was like, can I finish my question? And yeah, it looked abrasive, but like I said, I don't think there's any ill will. It's just Jonathan really likes to talk a lot, very passionately about his project, and get as many thoughts out there as quickly as possible, basically. And then Ziz wanted to make sure he finished his question so that the whole thing could be addressed. It's a bit of a nothing burger, but it certainly made everyone look a bit rough, depending on which side you wanted to pick. And immediately, it just set a kind of a tone for the rest of the interview, which wasn't very great as a, bystander. You're just like, mom and dad are fighting. Do I want to watch this? I don't know. That's kind of how it felt, right? So, and anyone that's currently got a problem with Jonathan just saw huge ammo, fuel to the fire. They're just like, yep, he's wrong. Can't believe he's saying anything right now. Just let fucking other people talk and let, Mark explain everything. So it did feel a bit bad, because almost anything Mark said was just getting W Mark based, all that sort of stuff. And anything Jonathan said was getting L's, even if they were basically saying the same thing. So almost immediately after I tuned in, I was like, man, this is pointless. And it's just, people have already made up their mind. So it was a bit rough. It was definitely a bit rough, but it ended well. And we did have, some good resolutions. We had some good questions. We had some good answers. And we had everyone amicably, resolving issues and saying, sorry for this, sorry for that. It seemed like it was a good overall interview. One that probably divulged a bit better information than most, and asked a bit more than everyone had on their mind. So just a few thoughts about basically the whole tone and some of the questions that were asked and answered that I want to go over. Yeah, you got to understand that, yes, GGG, they're pretty pressured right now. They just then put out 0.20 that's been pretty anticipated, and as it seems pretty apparent at this point, they're fairly behind where they always want to be. And that's a very common GGG thing. They've always wanted to over promise, and a lot of the time kind of under deliver, sometimes very much over deliver. Big patch and big expansion, we're like, holy shit, didn't expect that. But these days it's definitely that they're biting off more than they can chew, and it's tough for them to get out the product. And that seems to be the big disparity, where they want the product to be and where it is. It's obviously not always lining up, and a lot of the time what the product is being perceived versus what they hope it's being perceived as is also kind of misaligned. So, Jonathan came in very, I guess you could say defensive, but that's because he was, I fully understand, but I don't really blame him for any of this. It's because it can't be easy, right? Like knowing that you want it to look one way and it's looking another way, knowing a vision and then seeing it viewed a different way, and also knowing that you are behind where you want to be, it's all pretty tough. And at the same time, there's a lot of criticism going towards his way right now, so it cannot be pleasant. And he's just trying to get as many of his thoughts out as quickly as possible. Ziz, of course, wants to finish his questions. He, of course, wants to ask some hard-hitting questions and get some real answers, and he also wanted to make sure that he was being heard. So it came off a bit that way, but I don't think, like I said, anyone was, making any sort of ill will here. And then another thing that people were kind of like talking about is, Jonathan and Mark talking over each other, or more John over Mark. It was, I think that's just kind of their rapport, and it's like a real life conversation. I don't think that's a big deal or something to look into. So yeah, it looked like a bit of drama, but not necessarily anything. Maybe from Ziz's point of view, as a streamer, I can kind of say that it's kind of been frustrating for the past few days, and especially just in general with PoE 2 for the past 5 years. We are basically the first point of contact for anyone being angry about the game and direction and releases and not releases and all of that shit for the past 5 years. It gets pretty frustrating, especially when you want it to go well, especially when you're trying to put your best foot forward, and constantly people are just coming in and saying, this is shit, or that's shit, or this is boring, or you're boring, all this sort of stuff. It's kind of crazy, and it does make you a bit irritable. So maybe that's part of where, it felt like everyone was a bit on edge. So overall, kind of a nothing burger, I think. But yeah, we got somewhere, and we got some, stuff done. And overall, it seemed to be a pretty positive interview for everyone all around, I think. So one of the first things I felt that was actually kind of steered in the wrong direction was the question about the campaign clear time. It's hard for someone like Jonathan to answer what is the campaign clear time for the average player, because he's still thinking the average player is like fucking everyone, right? Fast, slow, barely ever played. And then they kind of diverted to all kinds of different stuff during that, which I found as a viewer just a little bit annoying, right? Because they're talking about one thing and then they just bring up another thing and then start going all over the place, and it wasn't really answering the question or talking about the right thing. So one thing I would have thought would be better for that specific question and kind of framing of that topic is you can go in kind of a bit more appreciative of what they've done in the past, and then talk about that, and then go into what the current situation is. Because I think the part of the main problem with the campaign, I feel, is saying let's just say we all love PoE 1. You've set the standard for ARPGs, gold standard for ARPGs, and we all love it. A lot of people still don't really like the campaign that much. And they're never pretty much gonna like a campaign. They just want to get through to the end game, because mentally that's where their character and their game starts. And even in this real gold standard of RPGs, the campaign for a fairly experienced player can take anywhere from 6 to 10 hours. And we've always that's been a big topic of discussion, and people want to have less and less of that. And we've been told in the past by Chris that it would be a lot better in PoE 2 just because it's a better campaign and you will feel it less, and that's great. But the problem is that if currently for an experienced player will take about twice as long to finish that campaign in PoE 2, do you see an issue there, or some kind of resolution to bridge that gap? I feel like that could have been a better frame question, or a bit better of a topic of discussion there, because currently we're talking 6 to 8 hours of campaign. Most people already didn't want to do that. Now we're talking a 16 to 20 hour campaign for most people, I'd say, on average. And even though it's better, it's just so much longer to have to get through. And the discrepancies there are movement speed and clear speed and distance traveled for certain maps and stuff. And that really would have been something to fully talk about there. But instead, we're basically just told, oh, the campaign's good, and we could do more damage or less damage, or fucking monsters do less damage, smaller maps, stuff I don't know. There definitely could have been a bit more framing and specific talk about the campaign like that. So that's one issue just to start with that I kind of want to touch on. But then overall, things went pretty well. I think I got a lot of, good answers that I feel I had, a good amount of answers and kinds of answers from both Jonathan and Mark. A lot of people didn't agree with that, and they were giving L's and stuff. But overall, he's still explaining their design decisions for the most part pretty well. and justifying most of the things they do. It's just there sometimes might be a bit of disconnect as to what's happening and what they hope is going to be happening, and it's not quite there yet. But I feel like watching this type of interview and this conversation, at least for me, and surely for anyone that's really, trying to give them a fair shot, it seems like fairly clear that they want to make the best game possible for you to enjoy, the best experience possible. Whether you're going to be into that type of game or not is another story, but at the very least, they're definitely looking like they're trying to make a good product first and foremost, and not really caring about monetization or trying to, drain you for all you're worth, because it's just about trying to put forth what they think is going to be the best possible game and making decisions towards that goal. Like you probably have heard of almost no microtransactions coming out. You wouldn't even know there was a mystery box that was out since day one unless you watch my stream. It's not really about monetization. It's not about, draining you. It's about just putting out a good product. And they're hoping to get there. It's just taking some time, and this very much is starting to give me that sort of feeling of pure, this is early access, and they're trying their best, and we're going to get there. So I'd say if you're like watching all this stuff and you're being particularly mad and like upset about directions and stuff, you probably should take a step back and just wait until more of the finished product is out. People like me, people like Ziz, we're going to be here and we're going to be like beta testing this shit and discovering lots of the stuff that doesn't feel good and needs changes, and hopefully giving feedback, and hopefully that stuff gets changed. And by the time we're getting a 1.0, maybe a year from now, it's much more of a complete game that has less of those problems and feels a lot more polished like a PoE 1. But it also seems pretty evident to me, based off of a lot of these answers, that they really are not trying to make a PoE 1, but just better. They're trying to make a pretty different game from PoE 1, just a different direction of the ARPG genre, because PoE 1 did go very far in a certain direction, and that's completely fine. It's good for a lot of people, but it's also not good for a lot of people, and it's hopefully, as far as we can tell, still going to be an option long into the future. But then we have PoE 2, which is going to be a very different thing and fulfill a different niche, and being built from the ground up. Lots of mistakes that were made back in PoE 1, which you might not think were mistakes, but they did. And that might just be a complete, divergence of opinion of what is part of a good game and what isn't. So, ultimately, I don't think they're going to try and fully appease the masses, but they do need to stay firm occasionally. And then they do need to, of course, come to some kind of middle ground sometimes, or at the very least, like I said, it seems like there is some kind of discrepancy sometimes as to what they are thinking is happening and they feel is happening, but it's not, because, either they haven't looked at the large numbers that are out there for various, campaign stuff or skill tests, or they're just, playing a bit differently than we are because they know a lot better than we do as to how these things should work and how to actually navigate this stuff. So there seems to just still kind of be a bit of a difference sometimes. But overall, it seemed like there was some good headway. They're going to make some good changes, and already some of these good changes have kicked in. So that's probably enough talking about the interview. Like, you can go watch Ziz's interview on his VOD channel or his YouTube, most likely. I would assume he's uploaded it there. And, get a thought for yourself. But I do want you to be trying a little bit partial about this, not just come in there hating one side or the other, because I think overall it wasn't too bad, and things are going in the right direction. It just might take some time to get there. Early access, and you can understand they're pretty far behind the 8 ball where they want to be continuously. They always want to be a little bit further ahead, and continuously they're a bit far behind. And even then, they're making some mistakes because of that, as opposed to just not releasing enough of what we want. So I want to then talk about some of the stuff that's already getting changed and some of the updates that are coming even as early as today. So yesterday, maybe you could say due to my own personal smudge video, they've already gone back and reworked some of the Act 3 changes they've reworked some of the Act 3 areas. They made some changes to make them a bit more palatable and a bit more streamlined. For the most part, what they're saying is that there's some, areas that should have stuff that don't, and maybe that's fixed in the future. But for now, because they don't have that, it's being taken away. And most of these zones should make a bit more sense, be a bit smaller. So pretty much all of these for Act 3 have currently kind of been looked at, and they're going to be reworked, and they'll be deployed soon. And that should make Act 3 a lot less like the Act 3 in Diablo 2, and a lot more like, I don't know, I don't have a fucking comparison for, the good part. The rest of PoE 1 or something. Acts that you can get through a bit quicker. So it should be a bit more streamlined, and of course they're going to be also looking at some of the Act 1 and 2 stuff as well, because yes, a lot of these zones are just too big. They've, finally confirmed that and said, sometimes it's a bit, dumb that you're walking in this direction and nothing happens, and realistically it's just a pure waste of time, and it's what's adding to the large amount of campaign clear time and the backtrack and all that sort of stuff. And they're still reiterating that checkpoints are going to be a bit of a temporary fix. So, in the future, just better layouts, probably, maybe movement speed, who the fuck knows. But checkpoints shouldn't be the thing that like holds together better clear times or a better feeling act and maps. So hopefully that's, something that we see in the future. But then they also said almost immediately after the interview, they said they're going to look at a lot of things after they talk to Ziz, and hopefully work on some changes that are coming pretty soon, which is, like good stuff. This is very, very quick turnaround on this sort of stuff, deploying the changes in the next few days. And it's some good balance changes and stuff. So they're going to, improve a lot of the skills, because part of what they said during the interview is that, yes, they nerfed a lot of things because they needed to bring some things back down to a baseline, but then they ran out of time to buff a lot of things and do an extra balance pass on things that need it. So in the end, it felt more like a bit of pill to swallow, as opposed to some give and take. So a lot of that's coming back in some of these changes that are coming very soon. So Sorceress has some changes, bleed and stuff, some of the very important ones. Energy Shield no longer prevents bleeding from being applied. I mean, that's a big one that some certain Quinn 69s were very upset about, and it's finally, being changed. Huntress has some extra stuff that should make it a good bit better, and it's already been given that skill that should make it a bit nicer to level early on with Frenzy, because as you can probably tell by now, everyone's that's, persevered and got some gear on Huntresses and stuff is having a pretty good time. Like, Huntress is a good class that gets somewhere once you've got like end game stuff, once you've got your character figured out, once you know what the fuck's going on. But early on, it's just very tough to get into, and that has been sort of changed a bit. So with the extra frenzy skill that you get, should make that a lot easier. With some of the extra stuff that they're changing here, should make it better. And then on top of that, they're looking over some of the drops and discrepancy in loot that we are seeing versus what they think we should be seeing. So that should also hopefully help the early game for some of these classes, in particular the Huntress. The warrior specific changes, I'm currently using this. It's not going to make a difference to the build I'm doing, but it is absolutely hilarious of a skill. The Smith Weapon of Katava thing. It's now going to add 3 empowerments per strike, and it's going to be 25% faster. So I mean, that's a pretty good change to make it more usable for the type of build that's going to use it. It's still not really a cool skill to be using like mid combat or between combat, but it is what it is. At least, like, this sort of weird quirky thing they're putting into the game is more usable and more appropriate for what it's supposed to be. My build's using it, and it's just 100% a meme, and I'll go over that in just a second. But at the very least, we're getting some kind of changes there. This one I think is pretty good after playing armor for a good couple days. Armor break being applied to players no longer has a 20 extra fizz modifier. Because yeah, you have all your armor, you take a bunch of damage, something breaks your armor, you have no armor left, so all of your damage reduction is gone, and you take extra damage. It's pretty crazy. So they've also reduced the duration from to 4 seconds from 12 from the extra fizz thing. So overall, that's some pretty good stuff. Aside from that, crafting, they wanted to make sure that, artificer orbs, so you're socketing your gear more often, is actually properly happening throughout the campaign, so there's a bit of an update there. This is a pretty big one. We basically all get map hacks now for our rare hunt, so this should make our mapping and clear speeds and just overall kind of annoyance in maps a lot lower. So the clear spin stuff a lot higher, the annoyance a lot lower, because yeah, I mean, it still doesn't feel like great design, but I don't particularly mind it, seeing the uniques or the rares on your map and then being able to run to them. Reminds me of, the days of D2 map hack 20 years ago, and you just go towards wherever you need to go to. Like, yeah, whatever. Maybe it's not the best design, but it feels good, so whatever. It's kind of fine in that regard. So far that's what we got. Maybe in the end, res and completing maps based on res isn't a thing, but for now this should make things a lot more smoother. And then they're going to look at monster speed. So it is pretty intense. I think it mostly matters in the end game, because once you get a bit of gear on your characters while doing the campaign early game, it doesn't really matter. Things can chase up to you, they can hit you, and it doesn't matter too much. It's when you get more to the maps and stuff that things really start to hit harder, and there's less opportunity for you to overgear that. And if you give this type of Thorns build a shot, then you'll notice that some things come at you really fucking fast, and they attack you really fucking fast. And you appreciate that with this type of a build, but you also start to appreciate that a lot of characters just have no way of getting away from some of these monsters, and you're kind of left to just get destroyed. So yeah, a bit of a pass over that one is definitely going to be warranted, and we'll see what happens with that. But some monsters I think are definitely too fast. Overall, it's not the biggest issue. Like, it's not fully game breaking, but it should be enhancing to enjoy for a lot of people if they change just a few of the mob type like speeds. Because if you really do pay attention to a lot of mobs, especially while playing this Thorns thing, a lot of mobs are fucking slow and don't do anything. And then there's a few of them that just like, boom, straight on top of you. So it's not like universal. It's just, it'll happen sometimes. And when it does happen, it does feel kind of bad. But they want to make sure that still happens sometimes, so that you are kind of threatened and kind of overwhelmed occasionally. So we'll see what happens with that one, because it is a complex issue. But I agree for the most part that when you're a bit slow and a bit weak, things do feel overwhelming, and that could be a bit of a gap that can be bridged, I think. So anyway, that gets me to talking about my Thorns character and going over the Thorns guide. Thorns really isn't a thing that you would expect to be quite as good as it is, but with the work that was put into it in the past patch and the actual established baseline, it's a pretty good archetype. There's a decent amount of Thorns on gear that was just then buffed, so both the shield and the chest armor can have big Thorns rolls, and so can the belt. And then you get a lot of Thorns from scavenged plating, I think it's called, which basically when you break armor, you gain stacks of this thing that gives you even more Thorns and even more armor. And then all it's about is trying to get things to hit you. At least that's what it used to be about, but now, with the few extra level 3 support gems, whenever you get hit, you can also apply some of that damage to your hits for 3 or 4 hits, and that's what's happening in these like boss fight clips here. Essentially, I'm just waiting to get hit, and then I can use my spear strike to triple hit them or quad hit them with all of my Thorns damage. And it's actually quite a lot of damage, at least in this early setting. It's a very fun sort of campaign playthrough where you're just waiting for things to hit you or looking for different ways of things hitting you. And just something, bit of an aside that I didn't even know, and maybe a lot of people don't know, when you're doing a ritual and you kill an exile, that exile is going to show up in the ritual again, similar to PoE 1, and it's going to drop all of its big dumb loot again. So it's actually a pretty big payday to get your rituals to have an exile if it's nearby, and then kill them again, which Thorns does quite easily. Because first of all, those exiles got nerfed. Second of all, Thorns. Things do not like hitting you when you have, I think at this point we're something like 5,000 Thorns damage, and that's just getting started. So all of this is very early end game content. Like I'm level 70 or something, just barely started mapping, have 5 exalts worth of gear, and all it really takes is just a few support gems, a couple of items that have Thorns on them, and ultimately you've got yourself a character that isn't very fast and honestly probably won't need nerfing ever, because people are like, wow, Thorns, it's looking kind of busted, Mathel, just because, how comfy it is and how little it takes to get going. But it is pretty slow. It is a fairly like measured playstyle. It's not going to be this big blasting world-beating thing. It's a little bit slow. It's a bit methodical, where you just try and look for the right hits, and then ultimately it gets things done. It feels kind of like the RF of the PoE 2 world, where it's reliable, it shouldn't be hard to put together, and then it's not anything crazy. It's just a bit of a baseline for certain characters and gear. that gets you at least to a certain point. So I've had a lot of fun with it. Campaign is great. Just started endgame mapping, and I want to go over what the character is, how to kind of build it, and hopefully our future aspirations for it. So there shouldn't be a horrendously new amount of information compared to the last video, but it's a bit more concise and hopefully a bit more fleshed out. We've got ourselves a currently level 73 Smith of Katava, which I did start for pure meme value for this type of build, just because I wanted to do the whole anvil thing while getting hit and killing monsters. But it actually has some practicality in it as well. With these nodes going this way, we can get a lot of max fire res, and with the right stuff, we can actually get 90 fire res that gives us 90 max cold and lightning as well, thus making us a lot tankier. This is absolute meme value. You don't have to take it. It will not do anything for our build. It's just funny to, you know, like do some fucking smithing in front of an enemy while it's trying to kill you. It doesn't actually do anything, so you don't have to take this ascendancy, especially not for that. But the ascendancy does have some good stuff in the form of fire res. And then if you want, essentially nothing else here is going to matter. If you want to free up your body armor, which does have a good amount of thorns, but it's going to be a bit of a trade-off and possibly worth it in the end, you wear a normal body armor and then you can spec some extra shit. Notably, I think max fire res, extra fire res, 15 life, 5 max fire res, and 25 fizz hits taken as fire seems pretty damn good to me. Maybe you'd rather the 5 regen instead of the fire res, but I think all of that stuff there, 4 points there, should make a pretty damn good defensive chest. And then my entire ascendancy is basically just getting thicker so I can get hit harder. So it's nothing crazy. I do think Thorns are very versatile and can be done on pretty much any other ascendancy, so just look for what you might want to build, how you might want to build it. But the important stuff is more on the passive tree, at least the way I've built it. The key things are Briar Patch Boots. They give you a lot of Thorns crit, so by default my Thorns has like 37 crit, something like that, 35 crit maybe. And then you just need a bit of extra crit damage and crit, and it scales you to quite a lot of Thorns crit. So sitting here completely unbuffed, we're talking 84 crit and 300 crit damage, and that's my Thorns damage without any unarmored plating up. So we have that, and then we have Thorns can retaliate against all hits. That doesn't mean every time you hit, you're going to be applying your Thorns. That means that instead of melee and range damage, instead of just melee, ranged and spell damage will also be hitting you. So it does seem pretty important, but it is possible to do some other stuff, like there's the thing that can make enemies low life, and then you can spec all kinds of low life damage nodes that just give you a shitload of extra damage. But then you got to make sure that you're getting hit in various capacities pretty much all the time in melee range, and it does get a bit awkward. So I really like this combo here. Aside from that, everything else is basically just rare gear. We have this thing, which is nice for leveling and maybe a bit of extra breaks armor, but we'll probably get rid of it eventually. And then you're just trying to get Thorns on gear if you can. So Thorns, Thorns, and Thorns, those are the 3 places, and we can get much more. These are still very basic items. And then with the way I've built the character, life, some crit damage, and then fire as wherever you can. You do want a bit of accuracy, a bit of crit damage, because we're still trying to hit things with our support gems. I'll go over that in just a sec. Let me do the passive tree one more time real quick. So to start with, when I first started this character, I went straight over to this Thorns crit and crit damage, and then spec this crit and crit damage over here, and that's how we started being a crit build. From then onwards, you can kind of go wherever you want, but I immediately went over to the leech so that we can start like getting some damage back as life whenever we're getting overwhelmed. And then I started caring more about block and specking all the way over here into these areas here. Damage was blocked recently, the block damage up there, bit of extra damage, bit of fire res. You can take care of mana entirely with blood magic, so you don't have to care about mana anymore. And then we are caring more about block, bit of fizz damage, and then down here, the extra fire res node. So the more fire res we get, the more max fire res we end up having. So right now I am at, 84 fire res. So if I just fix my gear up a little bit and then unspec this guy here, we'll have 84 fire res, 84 light, 84 cold. It'll be pretty powerful, but nothing huge. I think other ascendancies might be better for Thorns. But the main culprit for Thorns damage in this current patch is the new tier 3, so skill level 3 bursts, support level 3 burst, quill burst, and barbs. Whenever you get hit, next 3 hits, retaliate with Thorns, get hit, next 3 hits, or 4 hits, retaliate with Thorns. One of them's AoE, one of them's just pure single target. So to map with, and throughout the entire campaign, I did Armor Breaker with maces, But once I started getting into some, maps and stuff, I wanted to experiment with spears. And that's why I've also just picked up a really fast spear. You're going to need 2 shields for this. And then using rapid assault. And currently it's just got this crap sitting there at the moment. But you put in these gems instead. Or you can have this type of a setup in Armor Breaker all the time and Rapid Assault there. And then Rapid Assault has all this extra damage whenever you get damaged. And then you're just doing these big hits. It's especially thick and potent if you're getting hit a lot against a certain boss and you're just non-stop pumping out these big Thorns hits. So that's kind of the entire idea of the build. But for mapping, I am just using those extra Thorns things on my Armor Breaker and just running around doing Armor Breaker like that. You can kind of mix and match however you want and see how it feels, but that's currently my setup. My Spear Stab then consumes the Armor Break, so I can reapply Armor Break because that is important for Scavenge Plating. Scavenge Plating gives us a lot of extra Thorns damage, and it only works when you actually break an enemy's armor. You'll break all of the enemy's armor and get 10 stacks immediately against a unique boss, so you have to break the armor every now and again. And to that, I have Persistence, Thorn Skin, and Physical Mastery. Time of Need is one of our other reserves. It's really not that important, but there's not much else we can do, so I'm using Fast Forward and Cannibalism, and then Shield Charges have with Stomping Ground. I have yet to try out Caltrops, but I don't think it's going to be very good reading how that shit scales. So there's the support gem for Caltrops, all gems. There's the support gem, and I think you base that around like range and some extra deck stacking. It certainly doesn't factor in for us, but there's also the Spirit Reserve for Caltrops. It's over here. And I don't think that's going to factor in for us either, as far as I can tell. It takes a lot of dexterity that we don't have, and then it's got a certain amount of damage of its own, and then just increases and reductions do a bit of extra. I really don't think it's going to be very powerful, so I haven't tried it, but by all means, if you feel like it, go ahead. It just seems like it's going to be hard to get the dex, and then ultimately probably not worth it. So that's currently the character. I might try and go into a normal chest item and do the rest of my ascendancy for that. But otherwise, I might just get a bunch of armor, get more thorns there, more thorns there, more thorns there, level up, get more skill gems, socket gems, and just keep pumping. It's a pretty slow, methodical character, but it is fairly reliable and not super hard to build. So yeah, bit of a meme, but a pretty fun one and fairly versatile. I think you can make this on lots of different ascendancies. You can go to the low life thing, which is pretty expensive. You can go an Avatar of Fire build and convert all of it to fire and try messing around with that. But I think there's a lot that can be done, and I think it's a pretty cool one. So get out there, get hit, experiment. Big video, lots of opinions, so hopefully it was all kind of worthwhile. Thank you very much for watching. See you guys next time.